The ability to read the room, understand social cues, and make communication adjustments on the fly is one of the most overlooked leadership skills that a man can develop. And in fact, if you have ever wondered why your conversations feel awkward, networking feels difficult, and relationships seem to be a little bit harder than they should be, it's probably because of your social calibration. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the 8 signs of poor social calibration. Make sure you stay to the end because I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do to change their perception. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how we are feeling valued, how we are feeling respected, and how we're feeling wanted in the conversation. Let's dive in. Hey, what's up, folks? Grandison Shines here with the League of Prestigious Gentlemen. I want to first thank you for watching this video. Today, we're going to be talking about the subject matter, the 8 signs of poor social calibration. We will define that term here shortly because in my talking to other people, this is a fairly unorthodox and or new term. But before we get into the subject matter, I want to make sure that we understand what we do here at LPG. The main thing is that we turn men. We make sure that men become the man who can be trusted to lead himself first. And when that happens, he has a bit stronger direction, has more stronger direction. He operates by gentleman's standards and he turns potential into performance. And in fact, we focus this when a man becomes that particular opportunity, he is focused this drive in these 12 areas, which we call the 12 areas of success. Today, we are going to be talking about this one right here, social calibration and influence. Because when it comes right down to our subject matter, talking about being socially calibrated, poor social calibration is not the opportunity for a gentleman. In fact, what we want to make sure that we do is exude the opportunity and the prowess in said calibrated experiences. When you're out talking to people, and whether you're at a cigar shop or whether you're at a bar, whatever, a lounge, you're chilling, make sure, or at least the gentleman always makes sure, is that he understands how to read the room. Reading the room doesn't come natural. In fact, everything that we're going to be talking about today should be what we call a learned behavior. And if you ever have the opportunity to go through the program, which I'll tell you a little bit about shortly, then you'll understand how to facilitate the right mindset going into different environments. Because a gentleman, at the end of the day, is very, very strategic in how he operates in the workplace environment, in some sort of social environment, also the personal environment at home with family and children. So that being said, let's dive into the subject matter. Let's first define what social calibration is. But the main opportunity that I'm going to have over this whole entire presentation is the theme that there is a dichotomy. There's some friction between intention and reality. There's a difference, east and west, north and south, right and wrong, right? Understanding how far they are from one another. So when we're talking about this, it's not that the person may be doing this intentionally, but the person has to become more adept in understanding how to read the room and understand how to facilitate said skill sets for situational awareness so that he can make the adjustments. This is one of the biggest opportunities I find amongst men. And the reason why this happens is because most of us have not been given a framework in which to abide by, in which to grow from. The framework is important. Understanding how we do it here at LPG, there's a gentleman framework, and that framework is all about purpose. It's about understanding how to be more skillful, understand how to add value, be disciplined. There's a certain framework that encompasses the whole entire program. So if you're that guy, then this will be easier for you in order to understand. So let's talk about poor social calibration. It's fundamentally the struggle to read social cues and the failing to adjust your behavior at that moment in time. That's what it's all about. So adjusting your tone, your energy, your mindset in order to even the conversation to make sure that it fits the certain situation, the relationship, but mainly also that whole opportunity is the environment. And so there's a core dilemma between an uncalibrated man, and there's a profound mismatch, as I talk about here, between what is intended to be communicated, the intention behind what he is trying to say. And ladies, this can work for you too, because I have met women who are very much so socially uncalibrated. and understanding how to facilitate others and what others actually perceive you as what they're saying. Okay, so there's a dichotomy there. Okay, how others actually perceive you and what your intent is, east and west. So the uncalibrated man goes into the situation with a certain agenda, a certain mindset, a certain intent on how he is going to facilitate conversation. Everyone else in the audience perceives it massively different. So you have to understand how to make sure that there's congruence there. And the congruence will come by understanding how to read said body language, social cues, nonverbal cues, and such forth. So let's dive right into the symptoms, because I have 8 symptoms I want to talk to you about today, and we'll make sure we don't get too lengthy on this. Okay, so symptom number 1 is the the disruption of flow. This is the person who continuously interrupts people when they talk. We all have met that person, and he's really focused on really positioning his competence and knowledge and insight on this particular matter, or he just doesn't have the social calibration, or he doesn't have the social calibration in order to make that understood, but waiting his turn. So he believes he is demonstrating active engagement, quick wit, an elevated thought process, or the eagerness to contribute to the value discussion. The way it's perceived, though, is that the room perceives the fundamental disrespect for the speaker's thoughts. Ill-mannered, not learned in said communication exchanges, hasn't really valued that. And so it comes across as having the inability to practice measured restraint. Everyone else sees him as being more chaotic in his conversation versus being controlled. And we know that a gentleman is always about having a controlled conversation, not a conversation that is chaotic. Everything that a gentleman does is strategic, is well thought out, but even more so is very, very much so intentional, but with the right intent behind it, the right sentiment behind it. Symptom number 2, here's where we have a breach of discretion. This is the person who talks way too much about his personal life before it is even asked or before it even should be divulged. Their opportunities to gain some intimacy and to gain some sort of influence very, very quickly. And so they overindulge, they over communicate. So he attempts to manufacture rapid intimacy, trust, and vulnerability by bypassing standard social protocols. So that can't be done. If you try to force the intimacy, try to force the likability and the trust, then it becomes inauthentic and people see it as such. So in this environment, he reads it as it's a startling lack of boundaries. He doesn't know when to stop. I had this one guy sitting next to me one time in a cigar shop. I'm sitting there next to I'm a friendly guy. My energy is always open. So people start communicating with me, start talking to me. And he just started divulging all this personal stuff within 5 minutes of the conversation. Now, I understand wanting to instill trust. I understand wanting to be vulnerable in terms of, hey, can we have a centered conversation? But if you divulge too much information too soon, it is very, very, very off-putting. I didn't want to know about drug habits or other types of things that he's done in the past that soon. That's a conversation, maybe 2, 3, 4 conversations, well, more than 2, 4 or 5 conversations down the road after we get to know each other, different interactions. So the lack of boundaries is perceived. They also are resulting in other feeling burdened and by unearned closeness. And unearned closeness, as I put here, is because the person just feel like, you're trying to get too close too soon. Point number 3, the blind eye. This is the person who totally misses the obvious cues. I remember one time, this one guy, I had to pack up my stuff. I just finished this speaking engagement. This guy came up to me, he was talking, and I was under the crunch to get out of there. And so I started gathering my stuff, and I'm actually walking away, and he's following me. He didn't get the obvious clue that I wasn't looking him in the eye. I was very much so doing all the things, and I'm just, okay, cool. And I told him I had to go somewhere as well. I was very much so communicative. But he missed the obvious social cues, failing to notice the shifts in posture, eye contact, and conversational momentum. So the intent of this person, he is deeply committed to maintaining focus in his own narrative or objective. And that's believing the current interaction is progressing perfectly. So this person walks away from the idea of the conversation. If you ask that person how the conversation went, even if you recognize the the obvious cues, he would be like, oh, it went perfect. It's good. We're going to do some business. We're going to collaborate. And that other person may have a totally different mindset or thought process because that is not the way he experienced the interaction. So the perception is the room experience, it perceives him as socially clumsy, awkward, oblivious to certain cues, and entirely disconnected from the shared reality of the entire group. And so there's a dichotomy there of that blind eye. We all have had this experience and understand that, but we have to make sure we facilitate the right thought process going forward. Symptom number 4. Here we go, the monologue. Poorly calibrated man speaks excessively about himself, dominating the conversation's real estate. Very solipsistic, very much so self-centered. And we have the 5 levels of thinking in our program. And those 5 levels of thinking is self-centered thinking, altruistic thinking, expressive thinking, energetic thinking, and then expansive thinking. The innate self-centered thinking never took place in order to, or I should say, is continued to reside as the primary thought process because it has not gone over to the altruistic mindset of thinking. And any gentleman who's going to be in a social arena as a gentleman having the manners is very much so balanced in this area. Yes, we are self-centered, make sure we go out, we present ourselves appropriately, we smell good, we're groomed, everything else. That's about as far as it goes in that essence, and making sure that we are safe in the environment, making sure everything is appropriated. But when it comes to the altruistic thinking now, it's about shifting the thought process and the understanding to others, to provide value to others as well. So the intent here is he operates under the belief that he must aggressively prove his value, his status, his worth, and therefore it comes by validation and an approval of others. He wants to demonstrate his competence. He will brag about his accomplishments. There's a lot of braggadocious opportunity conversation going on here because he's more so self-centered. And so how is he perceived? Well, the audience perceives deep-seated arrogance and profound lack of intellectual curiosity for other people. Again, for others. If you're not demonstrating that you have some altruistic opportunities and thought process for others, people will shut down and start to retract from you. If you're not showing genuine concern about the lives and the insights of others, then you will lose your audience. I see this all the time. Point number 5, we talk about the empathy gap. This is the man whose calibration blatantly ignores others' discomfort when pressing a topic. Very much so close to another one that we'll be talking about here shortly. But the intent here is driven by desire to definitively win a debate. He must prove his point. He can't be wrong in an instance. He has to execute the joke that he started, and it has to land perfectly. And sometimes that can get very, very awkward, socially awkward. Doesn't have the empathy. So the environment registers him as cold and callous in this particular opportunity. A man who prioritizes his own amusement or ego over the harmony and comfort of the collective environment there. And I see this very much so often all the time. Other conversation topics are being broached, and it's not conducive for an elevated conversation or even an intellectual conversation with the people because that particular subject matter doesn't have a place. And this one here, it goes along tantamount with that, is the misjudged jest or the gesture, like the person who's always joking around. This person who makes inappropriate jokes doesn't know how to operate in humor in the right way. So it clashes with the said conversation and the tone of the conversation as well, the tone of the environment. So what's the intent here? The intent here is he actually is trying to break the ice. Give him a little credit. He's trying to break the ice. He's trying to lower the defenses. He's trying to have the open conversation, but he's rubbing people the wrong way. And entertainment through provocation, provoking some sort of thought process. Oftentimes it's forced. And so the group recoils from this behavior and feels offensive. Poorly timed, lack of basic situational awareness, lack of manners, uncouth, and the list can go on and on. This is how they perceive you. Here's the thing about it. They may not ever tell you how they're perceiving you. This is the one thing about this particular opportunity. They may feel this, sit there, give you all the nonverbal cues, and that's why it's so important to understand nonverbal communication. In our program, we talk about the 9 types of nonverbal communication. You have to be able to read all of them as a gentleman, as an astute, studied, competent gentleman. 9 types of nonverbal communication. And if you miss it, then you will fall into a situation that is very much so denigrating your brand as a gentleman, as a man. And that's not very astute in terms of being a leader. So your perception is the group recoils again, and understand that the group recoils. They will pull back from them understanding you personally. They don't want to go forward anymore. It is very incumbent upon us as gentlemen to be able to read the opportunity. Let's go to point number 7 here, the fading spark. This was here when the conversation starts to dwindle away and they still try to push on the conversation. So a poorly calibrated man here fails to recognize when audience interest in the topic has dissipated. It's going away. Let it go, as they say, right? He's motivated by thoughtfulness, right? That's his motivation. He's thoughtful. He's thoughtful in the conversation and the opportunity. But he's feeling a strong compulsion to properly finish a thought or complete a story that he started. Might not be the right time. We talk about timing, 6 strategies of execution. Timing is one of those. And so the listeners feel effectively held hostage by you wanting and having to perpetuate this particular conversation. And so this person who lacks the ability to read the room and pivot when the energy wanes. Oftentimes, when a conversation, you can feel when the energy for that particular topic is starting to subside and it's starting to wane, and you don't want to push on that any longer. It's like, okay, enough already. Let's move on to the next topic. I heard this one guy talking one time, and he and his friend, I could see the eyes of the friend, and actually was one of the guys that was one of my students, and we were at a local lounge, so a cigar lounge, we were smoking cigars. He had one of his friends there, and his friend started talking about this one subject matter, and he was going on and on and on and on and on with the subject matter. And finally the friend just said, man, let it go. Because he didn't get the other obvious cues of him turning his energy, trying to re-establish a conversation on another subject matter. He didn't read those signs. Socially inept, poor social calibration. So the friend had to finally say, man, let it go. And that's not the opportunity that you want either. You want to be more thought-provoking and be more observant, hearing and seeing in this type of situation. The last point we want to make before we dive into some other information regarding the same subject matter is this. Here, we have the opportunity to understand the downward spiral. Here, the poorly calibrated man continues behaviors that are visibly and negatively affecting the interaction. And so, since the interaction is faltering, this is the person that just doubles down on what he's doing. And it's even more off-putting, it's more disrespectful, is more uncouth in terms of understanding from the other person of how they're perceiving it. The conversation has denigrated, the downward spiral, it is there. But instead of letting it go, the person doubles down. And the room watches the uncomfortable display of stubbornness, social rigidity, not wanting to adjust on the fly. That's what that means, social rigidity, and inability to gracefully retreat from that particular conversation or that particular environment. Very much so off-putting, very, very detrimental to a relationship as well when you continue to have this hinge on. Now, this can be superimposed over many, many different subject matters. And again, one of those opportunities I mentioned earlier on was about relationships. This is why relationships tend to be a little bit harder, because of these opportunities, 8 opportunities right here that we just spoke about. And if you keep your ear to the ground, you're more observant and contextualize some things, then you'll be able to complete the sentence that they're not saying out loud and be able to adjust on the fly. That's where the savviness comes into play and the sagacity comes into play if you are understanding how to utilize said skill sets and a framework. And so let's identify the root cause. And the identity of the root cause is centered in one particular thing and one particular thing only. It is self-centeredness. Every single one of those 8 symptoms that we just spoke about is all centered in one thing. The root cause, self-centeredness, no outward focus. And so we have this inward gaze, a continuous inward gaze on the focus, the objective, and result. And we juxtapose the two because this is how the average man, the self-centered man, thinks about it, and this is how the gentleman thinks about it on the right side, the outward gaze. So the inward man, take a screenshot of this so you can have this. Monitoring one's own status, rehearsing the next sentence, and managing internal anxiety. The gentleman, what does he do? Observe body language. Check. Makes note of that. Keeps that in his head. He's completing the sentence that's going to be constructed in his head based on your nonverbal cues. Practicing active listening. Again, observation skills. Inquire seeing and hearing. And then reading the group. Tapping into that energy, understanding where the energy is going, how it's flowing, how it's being blocked, and then making that particular adjustment. The objective, seeking validation or proving personal worth in the room. Getting validation, making sure that someone is validating, he's getting the attention. He has to be validated. No, the gentleman doesn't operate that way. What does he do? He facilitates the flow. He's the one who's the catalyst of the conversation, make sure that it flows. And then when it starts to wane, he's reading the nonverbal cues, then he'll adjust. But elevating the comfort of others in the conversation, making sure that everyone is laughing. They feel comfortable. You can tell by certain opportunities. They're laughing, their energy's towards you, all the other nonverbal cues that come into play. And then finally the result. The result is friction, awkwardness, and social isolation. People are not going to want to continue to surround you. One of the gentlemen came to my program, he said, hey, you know what? I feel when I'm in the group of my boys, I feel like I'm left out of the conversation sometimes. And we had this conversation on social awkwardness and social calibration, and understanding how he's adding value to the conversation. But more so, again, a lot of the things that he was talking about were more so self-centered. And if it's self-centered, you can't operate from a place of authenticity. So how does the gentleman handle it? He handles it by seamlessly integrating everyone into the conversation. A seamless integration, the bandy of the conversation going back and forth, smooth, seamless, calibrated, congruent, balanced. And he further makes sure that there's a magnetism. People are attracted to one another. We're conversing, whether it's a man or woman, or from a relationship standpoint, a vetting standpoint, or if it's other people, your boys, your wolf pack, and you're talking to them. And making sure that there's true social calibration. And the way you can tell is because people will tell you via the nonverbal cues of whether or not they feel comfortable or they feel socially calibrated in the environment. So as you're moving forward with that, understand that the environment, the people will tell you how they're feeling, very much so loud. If you don't hear it from their mouth, you must understand how to read nonverbal cues. And I always say this in my program, you can't read just one nonverbal cue and think that that is the thing, the sentence. It's like saying the. What's the rest of the sentence? Well, you don't know. Well, you have to read nonverbal communication the same way. This signal plus this cue plus this signal equals this particular sentence. This is how they truly feel. That's how you read nonverbal communication. Again, it's a learned behavior. You have to understand how to do that. So the root cause is self-centeredness. So the true philosophy comes from self-mastery, mastering oneself, mastering one's social environment, and a gentleman is a master of self first before the environment. And true presence, understanding that mastering one's social environment does not require learning a script. It does require learning a skill set though. Getting coached, getting mentored, getting guided into understanding how to read said cues. It requires fundamental shifting of the lens through which you view the room. That can only come by way of someone giving you a different perspective. You have to have a new perspective, a new renewed mind, and understanding how to read this so that you are not socially awkward or socially inept in certain situations or in all situations. So you must stop observing yourself and begin observing your environment. And observing the environment takes the opportunity to shift the mindset and view from a new lens that someone has to guide you in order to what to look for. Because what you end up doing and trying this yourself most of the time, and I've had this conversation with other gentlemen, is that they end up back at the same place, which is right here in their own head. And that's because they don't know how to express value and communicate value through excellence versus incompetence versus trying to force it. That's another learned behavior. So the calibrated gentleman, here's what he does. He reads the cues, he adjusts the dial, and he masters the environment. Those three things. True calibration is the art of perpetual and subtle adjustments. I should say even continuous adjustments. It takes skill, it takes savviness, it takes insight, it takes wisdom, sagacity, and understand how to utilize the skill set. Read the cues, adjust the dial, master the environment. This is the opportunity. So what happens here? The only way to do this is to understand how to facilitate said mindset and moving forward. How do you do that? Get under someone who has the opportunity to share this with you. Become the man who can be trusted to lead himself first. If you become that man in the social environment, the social awkwardness and the poor social calibration will definitely dissipate. It will vanish. I promise you, because I see this all the time in the program, the way the frameworks work in teaching you said skill sets. So again, your future is waiting. If you are the man who wants to become the person who has mastered himself so you can have success in all the other 12 areas I showed you earlier, because you can have success, and you should have success in all of those areas. Go to our website right here, leagueofprestigeGentlemen.com/The-Forge. Read about the program. $30 a month for this program. There are other programs that we have that are much more, but this one here is a great starting point because you get access to a vault that has all this content related about the information that I'm talking to you about right now. Finally, last but not least, make sure you follow us on different platforms. We have a pretty good audience on Facebook. We have the Facebook page that's private just for men. We have the Facebook page, actually we have the group that's just for men. We have the page that's for everybody. And also the LPG, YouTube, TikTok, making sure that we also facilitate conversations for both men and women. Our whole objective, men, get you to the point where you're the one that you can trust yourself. Women, we want to help you out in understanding how to recognize, how to view and vet a gentleman so that you can have your very own gentleman as well. All right, folks, Grandison Shines signing out. Talk to you later. Bye.